Hello, my name is Andy and I am the Village Idiot. I'm armed with a car and a GoPro and an unhealthy amount of time on my hands. I'm using that time to attempt to visit every civil parish in England. You're watching the York series. Sitting within North Yorkshire, York is a very historic place with 31 civil parishes within its city boundaries. Here's one of them for your enjoyment. Good morning folks, welcome back to York. Now it's starting to get warm, and so warm that I've actually treated myself to a new pair of sunglasses and a new hat. I'm probably going to look like a complete village idiot today wearing this and wearing these, but I don't care because it is going to get very, very hot today. And I'm going to take you around Osbaldwick in the process. Here's my disclaimer for people who may be watching me for the first time. I say things as I would in my native accent and dialect. As a result, I may not pronounce things in the same way as the locals do. Remember, I'm a visitor. It's impossible to know everything. Leave me a comment, spin me a like and bash that subscribe button. Let's get to today's parish video. Welcome to one of the loveliest villages you can find in York. This is Osbaldwick, which is kind of a cross between a village and a suburb. It still has its original village character in its oldest part, but modern developments have now turned this one into a leafy eastern suburb for the most part. Osbaldwick lies 2 miles away from York city centre. Historically, it was part of the Ryedale district of North Yorkshire until 1996. Dating as far back as the 5th or 6th century, the old village was a rural community right through to the mid-1900s, when it grew into the suburban village that it remains today. In the 19th century, Osbaldwick was a centre for growing flax, which provided cattle, food and linen. The village also hosted 2 private asylums, one for men and the other for women. Amongst its landmarks, there's a pub which has seen better days yet still stands. There's also a church which has 2 notable burials in its churchyard, one of which nobody knows the exact location of. And let's not forget the former railway line, which runs right through a brand new community managed by a housing trust. Both of those things we're already familiar with. In fact, there's quite a lot of things in Osbaldwick which are connected in some small capacity to things we've already learned about in other York episodes. So let's see how many of you have been paying attention. I feel like a school teacher again saying that. Let's go. Our route begins and ends in the old village at a former chapel, which is now the village hall, currently used by a private nursery. We'll be back here in just over an hour. Running through the old village is Osbaldwick Beck, a small, pretty stream which we'll see plenty of times throughout this episode. Osbaldwick can be split into 3 main areas. As well as the old village, there's a later suburban-like housing to the south, and then there's Derwentthorpe to the west. That's where we come across a lake. A path follows the edge of this before joining a cycle track close to a playground. That cycle track is what used to be the route of the Derwent Valley Light Railway. Osbaldwick used to have a station on that line, which only lasted for 2 years, closing in 1915. The track was eventually lifted in the 1980s. Derwentthorpe was developed by the Joseph Rowntree Housing Trust. This is the Lotherington Quarter, named after Elizabeth Lotherington, Rowntree's grandmother. So just beyond that lake, there's a point where 2 footpaths cross, and at that point, which is where I'm standing now, you'll see this building. Now, when I clapped eyes on this, I thought, it's a massive barn. What the heck is that? Shall we go find out what it is? This is the super sustainable centre at the heart of the Derwentthorpe community. It's like a village hall and offers a central meeting place for residents, local schools and a place for local community groups to use. Its unusual design has won it awards. 2 in particular from 2017 are proudly displayed on its walls. Derwentthorpe on the whole is what you'd term a super modern mixed tenure community. Its housing is attractive, affordable and eco-friendly too. As well as the Lotherington Quarter, there's also the Seabourn Quarter, named after the second of Joseph Rowntree's 4 sons. Moving away from this area, we head out of the parish boundaries for a brief moment. To the west, this newer housing merges into the Tang Hall district of York. Temple Avenue and Moore Avenue bring us to Osbaldwick Lane and back into the parish again. Now at this point I was to pass a very dilapidated old building. And that brings us to a former pub which looks in a very sorry state at the moment. Hopefully this is going to be renovated at some point and turned into something better than what you see right now. I read a few news articles about this before I came here, so here is a little summary of what I found. This was the Magnet, and it was built in 1934 by Bertram Wilson, the chief architect of John Smith's Brewery. It's in a sorry state now, but even so it remains the best example of its type in York. It's been empty since 2018 and was declared no longer viable as a pub last year. There have been calls for it to be demolished to make way for flats, but objections from the York Civic Trust and Osbaldwick Parish Council mean today it still stands. Its future though is undoubtedly questionable. Now let's talk education. This is Osbaldwick Primary Academy, which actually has 2 sites, and that's important. The building you see here, which has the main entrance, is actually not within the parish boundaries. However, the other building, which you'll see shortly, is. It's a strange setup. After year 6, most pupils here transfer to Archbishop Holgate's school. We're now on the Lees, and there is that second building, which houses the early years and foundation stage. And that brings us to Osbaldwick Sports Club, which has got a big cricket club. Is there anything more summery than the sound of leather on willow, I ask you? Well, there's the cricket club away to the right, cricket square and everything. So yeah, a bit early in the morning for cricket, but I imagine at the weekends it's quite busy. So now we're into Osbaldwick's third clearly defined area. All this housing was built during the mid-20th century, expanding the old village to the south. This is where we find the local shops. There's a little row here on Farndale Avenue. This includes a Sainsbury's local, a carpet shop and a hair salon amongst other things. The 1950s and the first half of the 1960s saw an enormous expansion in this part of York. There were several small shops, including 2 butchers, a post office and a chemist, as Osbaldwick was transformed into a dormitory suburb. Today, many of the small shops and the post office have gone, but the village remains a popular place to live. The old Osbaldwick village is now effectively bounded on 3 sides by York's suburban spread, although a small area of greenbelt still exists to the north. There's some light industrial and trading estates to the east too. It's almost impossible to know without actually visiting where the old Osbaldwick village is, but we're about to go to it again. Okay, so after walking through the housing estate, we've emerged onto Osbaldwick Lane, which is where we find Osbaldwick Fisheries, which is the local chippy. Where would a village be, I ask you, without a local chippy? I don't know. Anyway, we've come up here really for the church, which is that way. Osbaldwick's church is dedicated to St Thomas. It dates from the 12th century originally, although it's been much altered since that time. Its most notable restorations and alterations came in 1877, carried out by John Aldred Scott. Later architects would alter the building again in both 1967 and 2005. It has windows which date from the 12th, 13th and 14th centuries, and one of them is a memorial to the former Sheriff and Lord Mayor of York, James Barber. One of its former vicars was the Reverend William Ball Wright. He was a noted genealogist and one of the first SPG Anglican missionaries to Japan. He served here from 1903 until 1912. There's some interesting grave markers in this churchyard. Take this one for example, which has a sundial on top of it. Eliza Raine is buried in this cemetery. Raine was the first partner to the celebrated English landowner and diarist Anne Lister. There was one other grave I was looking for too, that of Mary Ward. Born as Joan Ward in 1585, Mary Ward founded the Congregation of Jesus and the Institute of the Blessed Virgin Mary, less well known as the Sisters of Loretto. Her uncles were John and Christopher Wright, two of the conspirators in the Gunpowder Plot, who we last talked about in Welwick. At the age of 24, Ward experienced directly the voice of God calling her to a religious life. After moving to France to enter a monastery of Poor Clares at Saint-Omer, in 1606 Ward founded a new monastery specifically for English women at Gravelines in the Spanish Netherlands. The sisters in her religious community were known as Galloping Girls. Her idea was to enable women to do for the church what men had done for it in the Society of Jesus. It must have worked because there are now 200 Mary Ward schools worldwide. It's no wonder I couldn't find her grave, by the way. Nobody knows the exact location of her remains. Her tombstone, though, can be found inside St Thomas's Church. Okay, so to finish with, we're heading along Osbaldwick's main street, which is called Osbaldwick Village. Plenty of historic buildings along here, including that one that's behind me. This used to be the village school. When the population increased in the 1960s, classes were held in the old Methodist chapel until the new school was built off Osbaldwick Lane. The centre of the old village around this central green has been a conservation area since 1978 and still echoes Osbaldwick's rural origins. Here's a bus stop. Osbaldwick is served by two buses. These are the number 20 and the number 6, the latter of which connects the University of York to Clifton Moor. A hop over Osbaldwick Beck sees us outside the White House. I was stumped by this one. Who was Granny Scott in the doorway, I wonder? Let me know, folks. To get back over the Beck, I used Bycroft's Bridge. This was rebuilt in 2018 and dedicated by the local vicar to John Bycroft, a lifelong Osbaldwick resident. And lastly, we have the Derwent Arms. This was built in 1823 and was originally named the Black Bull, but was later renamed after the Derwent Valley Light Railway. And we're back to where we started, with one job left to do, and that's put one of these on the parish council notice board. And that is Osbaldwick in the books. Thanks for watching this video, folks. Don't forget to like this episode if you haven't already. It really makes a difference with YouTube. If you're new here, subscribe to the channel for more videos like this, and give us a share too if you've got friends who'd like it. You can find all the links to my social media accounts below, as well as my Buy Me a Coffee page where you can donate to the channel. Also, if you've enjoyed this episode, have a look at some more videos in this series. Until next time, I've been Andy, also known as the Village Idiot, and I'm out.